Ja, han ville bli en stor idol och sina toner ej bara slå. Och till slut han fick en fin idé.
So, there. Well, YouTubers, maybe you wonder what that was. Well, it was a short excerpt from a children's record that I grew up with back in the 1980s and, well, late 70s as well. It's a record with a very productive Swedish singer and composer and entertainer Tore Skogman, who apparently wrote and recorded over 1,000 songs in his whole career. And that's quite amazing, I think. He made this record with children's songs called Pojken som inte kunde sjunga, eller Hesa Fredrik, the boy who couldn't sing, or Horse Fredrik, horse with a voice. And why am I talking about this children's record today? Well, I thought I'm going to show you now today a video where I show some of my most beloved records when I was a child, because, well, sometimes you hear people talk about the stuff they listened to as a kid, and maybe they say, oh yeah, I was a Grateful Dead fan when I was 3 years old. Yeah, oh yeah, I listened to King Crimson when I was 2.5, and so on. That's of course pure bullshit. You didn't listen to that. That's just trying to make yourself more interesting than you were. When we were children, most of us, well, listened maybe to some simpler pop or to children's records. And I did that as well. So, but when I was 10 years old, I have to tell you, first of all, I more or less grew up sitting next to a record player playing different records all the time. That's what I did as a child. And, well, that has obviously formed me since then, in good ways and bad ways. But anyway, when I was 10 years old, I made this decision. Oh no, I'm too old for this now. I'm almost an adult. I'm too old to listen to children's records. That's so childish. Oh no. So I gave away all my children records. They were, of course, quite played to death by then, but because we had a quite cheapo record player with ceramic cartridge. I showed you the ducks before. Anyway, yeah. So I decided when I was 10 years old, no, I'm not going to listen anymore to these children's records. I'm far too old and mature for that. But of course, you know that's stupid. Those were part of your youth. That's what you grew up to. And you never really get too old for this. Even if you think you do. You have to keep some sort of inner child. So during the years, I've been trying to resurrect my collection of children's records that I had when I was a little kid. And I managed to find, I think, most of what I had back then. And some more too. I had lots of cassettes, I have to say that. I had lots of cassettes too as a child. But I don't really collect cassettes today. So many of these records that I'm going to show you today, I had on a cassette back in the 1980s and late 70s. Like this one. This is from 1968. Tore Skogman singing different songs about different themes to a, well, quite good arrangement, pop, easy pop, light pop arrangement by Håkan Elmqvist. And the engineer of this record is a young Mikael Betretov, who later would become famous for more or less creating the ABBA sound. So it sounds very good. All records where Mikael Betretov have been involved sounds very good. So, and I'm quite fond of this. I'm not a Tore Skogman fan in other senses, but of course I have a special fondness for this album that I had on a cassette as a kid. Right, so let's start by showing you some other records. Or we already started. Yeah, I was a great fan of Anita and Televinken. This is the doll, Televinken, and this is Anita. And here they are joined by their friend Grodan Boll, the frog ball. Don't ask me why. This is, they started on Swedish Television, but later they switched to radio, where they made, well, edutainment for children. Anita being the kind of mother figure, and Televinken coming up with really, well, nosy questions, the kind of questions that children would ask, and discussions around different words and things that happen in society. Also, they learned a whole generation on how to behave in the traffic, because they have the traffic school for kids with Anita and Televinken in the late 60s and early 70s. I was a member too, and I got 4 EPs with recordings that they made where they discussed traffic rules in a very entertaining and not at all in a way like this, but more in a playful way. And I'm very fond of these two. They were also back on television when I was a kid in the early 1980s in the Swedish TV show God morgon Sverige, which was the first morning show in television, Swedish television. And for many years, the only morning show. Okay, and this is called Veckans Tisdag from 1972, and I had this back in the days on vinyl too. And yeah, recordings from radio. Okay. Then we have Organelle Sax och Byköpings gästabud. This is the soundtrack taken from animated movie by the Swedish children book character Organelle Sax, who was a bit like it's a bit of a parody of Sherlock Holmes. He lives in this small society called Byköping, where he is the chief editor of the newspaper there, and he solves different crimes. I mean, we don't really have much violence and stuff like that. It's a friendly crimes, and some good songs on this. Great actors. Bert-Åke Varg, voice that I learned to love as a child, is the narrator on this record, and the voice of Organelle Sax is made by Olof Thunberg, who was famous back in the 1950s as the Man in Black, where he told really spooky stories on the radio. This is 1976, and yeah, this is actually the same copy that I had as a kid, so it's a bit worn but not played to death. Okay, then we have, I think many of you Swedish old children recognize this one. Bamse, världens starkaste björn, the strongest bear in the world, Bamse. Also very popular. They made animated movies with him, and he had a very popular cartoon paper, and that still exists today, I think. The narrator of this record is the same guy as I talked about earlier, Olof Thunberg, and these are recordings from the early 70s, I think. And I think I had this on a cassette. What's so special about Bamse? Well, he's the strongest and also the kindest bear in the world. So, and when he eats a particular kind of honey called dunderhonung, he becomes the strongest bear in the world. And it is his grandmother who makes this honey. Very sweet stories, and they have a kind of moral idea about you shall always help those in need and be kind to those who are weaker than you. And I think that is, I mean, today we get the idea that, what? Be kind towards those who are weaker than us? Let's kill them. No, I don't really agree there. I think the good moral values. Yeah, this is a bit of a later children's record because it's from 1988, and now it's also from the radio dramatization of Gusten Grodslukare, written by the Danish author Ole Lund Kirkegaard. Very popular when I was a kid. And what's so special about this is that some of the actors, they come from up the north of Sweden. Some of the actors on this record were to be later to be teachers for me in the early 1990s. So that's quite fun. Right, this is a very particular one. This is the only with the Disney collection, or Disney connection. Disney Matinee. Short versions of the stories about Alice in Wonderland, Robin Hood and Pinocchio. And the narrator is the late great actor Håkan Särner, and with some different music numbers too. This record, although not this particular copy, was played, I listened to it, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of times as a kid. Often this was put on when it was time for me to sleep, so I often fell asleep listening to these stories. So I feel quite a lot for this album. From 1975, recorded in April 1975. And this is a later copy, of course. Then we have, I think I've showed this before, the two Russian dolls, Jena and Cheburashka. And they were imported to Sweden, and they made their own stories. The Swedish radio man Sten Karlberg and TV personality Anita Bolme made their own versions of the stories that hasn't really much to do with the original Russian stories about Cheburashka and Jena. And in Sweden they were called Drutten och Krokodilen. Drutten, that's Cheburashka. Krokodilen, well, the crocodile. So, and he's also called Jena. There were 5 albums made with these, and they are very funny. They a bit kind. They're a bit of a. They discuss different things in society, different words, and what different words mean. And Drutten is the childlike person, and the curious person. And Krokodilen, Jena, he's like the grown up, the adult who thinks he knows everything, but actually don't really know that much at all. So that's a very fun couple. Very fond of these two. Alas, both Sten Karlberg and Agneta Bolme are gone today. They were very popular back in time. Alright, let's hurry on. Then we have this album, Lucky Luke. Well, those of you who are into French and Belgian comics, you're well aware of this. And I think this comes from a movie, an animated movie. I think it's called Daisy Town, but I'm not really sure. From the early 70s. And what's fun about this is that all the voices are being made by this by the Swedish actor and imitator Olof Buckar. And he makes some. There are some really fun moments on this, because first of all, when he lends his voice to the mayor of the town, he uses the voice of the then Swedish Minister of Economical Affairs, Gunnar Sträng. And that's really fun. And also, he lets the Indians talk with a Finnish accent. And as a kid, I thought that was so incredibly funny. I still do. I think, Dig blekansiktet talar med kluven tunga. I think that's really fun, really, yeah. I'm still a child. Then this one, I Sagoland. Different stories written by Swedish and Norwegian children's authors. And read by, famous people of Swedish radio entertainment. Åke Falk, Gösta Knutsson, Olle Björklund. And I had this on a cassette. Played it many times. And very fond of it. Have it on, as you can see, on LP now. One of the greatest actors that Sweden has ever had was the actor Stig Järrel. and he was extremely productive. He made loads of movies, theater shows, comedies, tragedies, everything. And he was active up until, well, he was quite old. I saw him on a guest performance up in Luleå after he had his 80th birthday. I think it was in 1990, maybe 1991. And I remember him as a living legend back then. And he made also now and then records where he read stories. And this is one of them. Spöket på Canterville. The Canterville Ghost. Of course, very famous story told by Oscar Wilde, but I want to show you here if you can see. There. Have a look there. By Edgar Allan Poe. The later pressing, this error had been changed, so it was really Oscar Wilde. One fun thing about this album is the length of the recording. It is the whole, well, it is a short novel. It's more like a long short story. The whole story is crammed into this LP, and I think we have a full time. The full time of this album is maybe like a CD. Maybe it's 74 minutes. So we have around 37 minutes on each side, and that is impressive. Of course, the sound quality isn't super, but after all, it's mainly Stig Jarl talking with a ghostly echo on his voice all the time, which makes it a bit more spooky, and with some electronic background music by Hans Edle. Okay, and some sound effects. So this is where I found out who Oscar Wilde was and what he could write, and I've been a great fan since then. Well, I've already talked about this record in an earlier video when I talked about the demonic locked groove. Swedish Television, Fem myror är fler än elefanter, a TV show that have learned generations of Swedish kids to read and the alphabet and numbers and so on. Magnus Härenstam, Brasse Brännström, Eva Remius, all of them are alas gone now, lost, very sad. But also 2 albums were made from the TV series that are still, well, the TV series is still available on DVD and in different formats, and in Sweden I think you can see them online. And 2 LPs were released. And I think these have been released on other formats. I think you can get hold of these recordings today as well, probably on Spotify or something like that. But you have to mention them because a playful way to learn the Swedish language, and it's so good, and we are so many generations that are thankful that we had this TV show when we grew up. Yes, another popular character in Swedish books in the 20th century was the cat Pelle Svanslös, in books written by Gösta Knutsson. It was a bit of a satire, even if many people maybe didn't realize it that back then. It's satire about World War II, because his big enemy in these stories, the bad cat Måns, he was actually based on Adolf Hitler. Yeah, and well, here we have 2 of the stories about Pelle Svanslös, dramatized. This record was made in 1978, and we have some great actors like Per Myrberg, Börje Ahlstedt, Ulf Brunnberg, Lars Edström, Fille Lyckong, and yeah, this is another record that I listened to a lot as a kid. Okay, over to a children record that maybe not that many know of here in Sweden, the space musical Captain Albert Moss from 1979, probably recorded in 1978, because one of the participants, the comedian and singer Bernt Dahlbeck, he passed away in 1978, so the recording must be from 78 or earlier. This space musical was written by the Swedish rock singer and, well, impresario, Little Gerard. He was one of the early Swedish rock stars in the 50s. He had a big hit with Louis Prima's Buonasera here in Sweden. And he's been active during the years as a record producer. And of course, he wrote this space musical, Captain Albert Moss, about this space captain who comes to Earth, meets some children, and takes them on a trip to the planet Mars. That's the main plot, and things happen there and so on. Why is this so special for me? Well, I don't know. Maybe because I like the playfulness of it. I like these actors like Bert-Åke Varg and Bernt Ahlbeck and so on. And also I like the songs. And well, I got this on a cassette when I was 5 years old. It must have been in 1980 or maybe 1979 or 1980. And I listened to it over and over again, and I knew this record by heart, or this cassette by heart, until, of course, what often happens, the cassette broke, so then it was gone. But some years ago, I managed to find this vinyl version of it, and it was fun to listen to, and notice that I actually remembered most of it, even if it was, well, 30 years since I heard it, so that's another favorite. This is a record called Sound och Sång with Staffan Ling and Bengt Andersson. And the record is actually taken from the TV show that they had for 15 years called Sant och Sånt, where they talk about, this is like science education for little children, and it's made in a very playful and funny way. And they made different experiments and talked about different, I think everything I learned about physics back then, I learned from this show, not from school, because it's so, I love what pressure is and what bimetal and stuff like that. This is a vinyl record where they try to, well, take what was on the TV show and make a record out of it. It works so and so. We have some songs where they sing, maybe not that interesting. It's not as good as the TV show, but since they represent one of my favorite TV shows when I was a kid. Anyway, so that's why I think I should show it here. Okay, talking more about dramatizations of cartoons. Here we talk about the American cartoon ScoobyDoo. There were maybe 5-6 different LPs with ScoobyDoo dramatizations here in Sweden. This is the second one from 1975. And great actors as always. This is the story where they get caught on an island together with the Harlem Globetrotters. And I think that's a fun thing because, of course, Harlem Globetrotters being the famous basketball team, and Swedish actors trying to play, black basketball players, especially today rather big and fat actor Peter Harrison playing an American basketball player. Today I think that's really funny, although of course I didn't really think about that back then, but fun to have. Basketmysteriet på Spöken, the basketball mystery on the ghost island, if you translate it like that. And more dramatization, but now of Belgian cartoons. Astro Smurfen. Well, those of you who are maybe familiar with the Smurfs were really big in Sweden in the late 70s and early 80s. Lots of Smurf records or Smurf related records were made, and these small Smurf figures sold like hell to children, and I had lots of Smurfs as well. I was totally mad about Smurfs. I was a very small child then, of course, so I can be forgiven for that. Still, this is a record that I have some fond memories of, because it was the first record I saw that was in colored vinyl when I was a child. It is in blue vinyl, as you can see, as of course a proper Smurf record should be. So that makes this interesting in a historical way for me. And great actors as always on these old children records. they didn't pick the actors that only do children's stuff or who only do dubbing. It was real actors working for the Royal Dramatic Theatre here in Stockholm. The best actors Sweden had back then for the children records. And you can tell because I think they hold out very good today. Very good. Okay. Over to a children's record that I had to look for quite a long time. Well, what's so special about this? Den tjocka pannkakan, the Fat Pancake. Stories told by Sture Ström, another actor who made lots of material for children. And this is from 1975 on the low-budget label Moondisc. Well, this record was a record that you could find in my grandparents' home. They probably bought it because they knew that when I, as a little child, if I went to them and I seemed to get bored, they could always put this on and I would listen to it. And, well, they could have some peace as well. That record became very scratched up, and I think somebody sometimes, without knowing it, put a hot coffee cup or something on the record because it got some heat damage. And it was more or less impossible to play. After a while, the needle kept skipping all over the place. But I remember the stories, and some of them I thought was really, really funny. One of the stories on this record I even told my schoolmates when we had some, well, once every week, somebody from the school could tell a story or do whatever to entertain the others in the class. Of course, that's gone today. Alas, I think many performers have had their first experiences that way, and I remember telling one of the stories from this record, but I remember I thought it was so fun, so I kept laughing. I probably laughed much more than the audience, but that's how many comedians do it today. To show that it's funny, they laugh themselves. Right. So, but it is quite rare because it took a long time to find it, and often, of course, when you look for children records that are old, they haven't been really handled with care, and often they are in horrible condition. So that's another issue, of course. Okay, bear with me. I have only 3 more records to show. I've talked about the dramatizations of the books of the cartoon books, cartoon albums, about Tintin or Tintin, as it was called in Belgium, probably because it's a Belgian cartoon. All of these records that were made with these stories, these dramatizations with Tintin, they're really getting very sought after today. People are bidding on websites, and some of them go for high amounts of money, and that's quite fun, I think. And very understandable because they are very well made with great actors like Thomas Bolme and the best Captain Haddock ever in Åke Lindström. This is my favorite story because it is the story where absolutely nothing happens and they manage to make a great adventure out of it. I think Hergé, who made the Tintin stories, had great fun himself when he made this. Right. Trasan och Banane. A bit of a parody of Tarzan, of course. Well, Trasan is Lasse Åberg, who later will become a very famous and popular filmmaker, and the singer and entertainer Klasse Möllberg, who as Banane. They made television, and often when you're on television and make TV shows, you're expect to make records as well. And that was probably quite wise because back then you couldn't get hold of video recordings of the TV shows because nobody had videos then, or VCRs, not here in Sweden anyway. So often you got the record to be able to hear the songs and, well, again. So this is from 1977, and I think around 4 or 5 more records were made. They later developed into the rock group Electric Banana Band, who were to become very popular in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And then over to the last record here, and it comes from the Swedish TV show for children, TV-piraterna, the television pirates, where a group of people hijacked a TV station and made their own TV. And that was really, really, you didn't do that back then. That was considered a bit risky at the time, and really a bit of a tougher. I remember it. I mean, this was back when I was 7-8 years old. It was presented as a really a little bit of a more risky TV children's show for this, and people talking with in a tougher style, and they were a bit, more. If you can imagine that. But I've seen some clips nowadays when I watch it, and I thought, well, actually this was quite lame, but great fun for the children. And I remember they also had all these different things like small stickers that was sold before the show started. And I don't remember the purpose of those stickers, but I remember putting them everywhere, making my mother crazy. Driving my mother crazy, seeing all these bloody stickers everywhere. I can't understand how she put up with me, to be quite honest. And of course, got the record too. TV-piraterna. Well, long video. I can't imagine you watched up until now. If you did, well done. Well, hope you found it somewhat interesting. Bye-bye.